Hello again. My name is Peter Weygang. I am the Secretary of the Citizens for Direct Democracy. We are, in a small way, beginning the fight to regain democracy for the people, and it will be a big war. And it will take some time. There won't necessarily be bloodshed, but there'll be a lot of bad feelings before we are through. So let us look at these slides as I explain what we need to do. Now, you may not recognise this officer. It is Lord Kitchener. Now, I was born between the two great wars, and even I can remember his picture being fairly common to be seen, although he predated me by a good long time. He was a successful officer in the Boer War and had a good reputation and was loved by the British people. Now, he had the job of, just before the war, of getting a big army together, and he did it in a remarkably short time. It was called the Kitchener's Army, and it had over 1.5 million people, and those are the people who went to Europe, and so many of them lost their lives in fighting for democracy and freedom. They are the same two things that we are fighting for in a political sense today, but we also need an army as well. So this is what we need. We need an army of people of democratic persuasion, and we need you now. Now, representational government has failed us all, and is really killed by what we now know as party politics. In the party politics machine, it's that which elects members of parliament. In order to be elected, you really need to be one of the three parties, because then you can use their resources, their money, they can get meetings together for you, they can get you onto the newspapers and everything else. So you have no hope of being a member of parliament unless you belong to one of the parties and use their party machinery. Now, if you do get elected, you go to the House of Parliament, and then you suddenly find that you have to obey the party whip. He tells you when and how to vote. Now, the party whip, in turn, is the Prime Minister's enforcer. So the Prime Minister says, "Whip, do this," and he does it. So in reality, the members of Parliament are robot voters. And in my opinion, it would be better for us all if they simply stayed home and phoned in their vote on various issues, because that's about all they are worth. So we've come to a strange type of governments now. We don't have dictators. We have few kings left in the world. We got 1 or 2 dictators. But in Canada, we have a new thing, and I have to call it the new regency. So we have a regent, Trudeau, who rules over us and to whom everybody bows and scrapes. Now, before I get you really interested in democracy and supporting us, I want to go back through its long history, and I want to go back from the present time backwards, which is an unusual thing to do, because you can see as I go backwards in history how it all coalesces together to be the very beginning of what democracy truly is. So let's start here in 2016 AD. This is us. This is our attempt, where your voice is always heard, where your vote always counts, and we the people have the right to say things will happen or this which will not happen. There are many such organisations like us in Canada and throughout the world. In fact, we had difficulty with our name because there is already out west an organisation called Canadians for Direct Democracy. Then that's why we are Citizens for Direct Democracy, to keep the two separate. But fundamentally, they are the same purpose and the same aim. Now let's go back to 1960. Now you wouldn't think I'd quote an anthropologist in this kind of discussion, but Margaret Mead was perhaps the most famous anthropologist of all time. And what these people do is they look at human society, and they don't say human society should behave like this, or wouldn't it be nice if they behaved like this. This is how humans behave. And one of her most famous quotations is this one: "Raising a child requires the whole village." She was working in some primitive societies at the time, and that's what she found. For the full development of a child, in all aspects of it, it needs everybody. It needs the parents, it needs the uncles, the aunts, the elders in the village, the wise people in the village, all having input to this child, make sure this child is fully developed and fully capable of taking care of itself in its own life. Now, we believe the same thing, but our child here is democracy. We believe that democracy needs the support of everybody, all getting together to help democracy grow and to serve us well in the long term. Another quote from her, which is not so common, is: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." And isn't that the very truth? And we hope that we are one of those small groups that's helping to change the world, and we will be able to do it much better with your support. So we go back a bit further to 1863, the famous Gettysburg Address by Lincoln. He's looking out over the fields where the battles took place, where thousands and thousands of people died. And he makes this statement: "That these dead shall not have died in vain, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." And there's a great sadness in me when I read that, because only the first part is true. Government of the people. It is not by the people, and it's not for the people. And we appreciate that when we see things happen in our country and in other countries throughout the world. The idea that we should be able to govern ourselves is embedded in here, but in fact it has failed, and in a sense, all the people who have died in all the wars for democracy and freedom have in fact not been able to achieve that end. Now, I want to deal with Switzerland because Switzerland is a unique case. So we're back really here. I wanted 1848, but it really starts earlier here, 1291, the old Swiss Confederation. Now this is Switzerland, and all these different colours are cantons, and I think there are 26 of them. Now each canton is made up of little municipalities or communes, and I've selected this one here, the canton of Neuchâtel, this little area here. In this very small area there are 36 municipalities, and right at the very beginning of the Confederation, they say, is made up of 22 sovereign cantons. This canton cannot tell that canton what to do, nor can this one here or any of the others, and the same is for the communities in here. The canton of Neuchâtel cannot tell what the community here must do or here must do. They're independent, and it came about because, unlike the rest of the Europe, which was conquered, this was an affiliation of friendly peoples who came together for themselves. They came together without sacrificing any of their own individual culture or any of their own individual rights. So what happens is that the little communities do their thing for communities. Anything which needs a bit bigger area, then the cantons can get all the communities together and do the things. Anything which is national, they have a national government for, say, terms of trade with the EU and stuff like that. So they have these three levels of government, all keeping their hands off the other levels of government, and it was so similar to what we had before amalgamation that it's really unbelievable. We had a kind of a independence which let us do our own thing and really determine our own fate. So Switzerland has instruments of direct democracy, and by that we mean referendums and other vehicles, and citizens have more power than in a representative government. There are 3,000 autonomous municipalities in a population less than Ontario. There's about 7 million people in Switzerland. So this gives you some idea of how much local control there is in Switzerland. And the interesting thing is that you hear of turmoil in Germany, in France, in Poland, in England, all over, you never hear anything about Switzerland, because Switzerland is always implementing the will of the people. And if you're implementing the will of the people, you're not going to have problems. So this is a model which we would like to see adapted to our situation in Ontario. A bit further back, the French Revolution, a really nasty time. But this was their emblem here: liberty, equality, and fraternity. These we understand very quickly: freedom and equality. Fraternity is an interesting idea. This really means a brotherhood. It's really saying, yes, we're all free and we're all equal and we are all in it together. This is not leadership by somebody outside. We are it. Liberty, equality, fraternity, and that is reflected in the concept of direct democracy, which really has this embedded in the very idea. We go back a bit further, 1771. This is the name of a book. Vox Populi, Vox Dei, being true maxims of government. Is a book, it's a handbook really, which tells people how to rule a country in justice and fairness. And this first bit here, Vox Populi, Vox Dei, I'll come to in a minute. But in there you'll find this: no man of common sense can imagine that at the first propagation of mankind there were such governments as are among us at this time. And I find that remarkable. 200 years later, this is the truth. We have appalling autocratic governments all around the world which do not serve the people. Now let's go and have a look at this piece here in the next slide. Here it is. Alcuin of York. He was a scholar and a priest in England. He went to work for Charlemagne, 785 AD. And Charlemagne was a very successful emperor, first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. And he was kind to the people. And actually this was a warning from Alcuin. He said, boss, you've got to be careful. Because don't forget that when the people are speaking collectively, they're being inspired by God. And you could end up by giving them a bit too much power. But that's what it means. The voice of the people is the voice of God. There's a righteousness about people when they speak together, when they come to collective opinions about what is just and fair and proper. We know intuitively what it is built into us as human beings. Now, we can't go back much further until we run into the Dark Ages. This was the end of the Roman Empire. Not much happened really. Islam arrived. Egypt was taken over by the Muslims. All throughout Europe there were wars and people charging around on horses and knights and so on and so forth. Not really much happened in a democratic sense here. No, actually the whole field of science really went into the Dark Ages as well until about the 10th century. So I don't have anything to report to that. So we have to go back through that to slightly before the beginning of the Roman Empire into the Greek situation. Here we have it. So we're back in 508 BC. And Cleisthenes, it's a terrible word to try and say. There was an uprising in Athens, and they overthrew the tyrant, and they came together in the city square, and they said, we are going to rule ourselves. We're going to rule ourselves, and they set up a system of how to do that very quickly, and it was very successful and lasted for 400 years. In this system, citizens had equal political rights, freedom of speech, and participated directly in government. And this is absolutely extraordinary. They could get 5,000 people together and they could make decisions collectively. They had the ways to do that. Freedom of speech was very interesting as well. As you know, if you go and speak to the city of Kawartha Lakes, you get 5 minutes, because 5 minutes is all you're allowed in this particular democracy of City Kawartha Lakes. I've been there and done it. In Athens, you just put up your hand and said, Harold, I wish to speak, and they gave you the floor. Isn't that absolutely truly remarkable? So this is where I'm getting back to all this stuff coming down from our time to the Greek time is tied up in this one word, demokratia, democracy. It's made up of two words, demos, the people. That's the whole body of citizens. And we get this word demographics from this when we study populations, and kratos, rule. So this one word, democracy, actually means people, power. And we now refer it to really as direct democracy, but it's exactly the same idea. And it goes right back to these Athenians 500 years BC. And it's time for that idea to come back into full play so that we can rule our own destiny. So we've come full circle to Citizens for Direct Democracy, where your voice is always heard, where your vote always counts. And to bring this back, we need your help, as I said in the beginning. We need the public to see that direct democracy is a real alternative to representational government. We need people to come forward to run for public office who believe in people power. We need the government to enshrine the right of people to rule themselves using referendums. And Patrick Boyer, whose book I've read, he was a member of Parliament in 1988, and he tried to get this through Parliament, and they wouldn't pass it. And of course they will never pass it, because it takes power away from them. And that is why I say we must elect people to office who believe in it in the first place. Now, and we need people to support groups such as ourselves who are committed to this process. Not everybody can be engaged, but of course you can all help the process. And the questions to ask ourselves are simple. Why do we need representatives when we can rule ourselves? And why do we need one of our equals to lead us when we know where we're going? And unfortunately, some of the people who are leading us, I don't think are even our equals. So, this is the situation. We have democracy going up in flames. All around us we have various issues about closing of ice rinks and fire stations and water taxes and other things. And we go around and we rush and we put these things out, or we try to put them out. And that simply is not working. It is not changing the fire where democracy is going up in ashes. We must all stamp out this large fire, and we must start again with the people in charge. Thank you. Well, I hope that gave you some idea of the long history of this particular, I think, human yearning to be in charge of their own destiny. It comes naturally to us here today, and it came naturally to the Athenians. And we must fight tooth and nail to get it back in place, stop the corruption, stop the wastage, and stop all these very peculiar ins and outs of modern politics. It is time to wipe the slate clean and start again. And once again, if you like this, we would like you to make that little note on your computer, and also if you can support us in any way, please do so. Once again, we do meet every second and fourth Thursday in Bobcation at the Service Centre at 7 p.m. Upstairs. Thank you very much.